Welcome to the Mystical Dream Studio.
Greetings, poor souls! Welcome back to the Mystical Dream Studio. Like it or not, I am once again your host, Madman McQueen. You have to forgive me, I'm a little upset. October's gone, which means Halloween is gone for another year. But this is November, which means more holidays are coming. Thanksgiving, Christmas, New Year's, Valentine's Day, and so forth. But we'll get to all of those when the time comes. Meanwhile, I've just been sitting here pondering some of life's imponderables. Like, why do they call it a building after it's already been built? And why do they call them apartments when they're all built together? And why is abbreviation such a long word? And why does the United States have a department dedicated to everything outdoors called the Department of the Interior? It's maddening if you say so. I suppose I should be focusing on more Thanksgiving-based things, but I don't know. My wife told me I better not have any Thanksgiving jokes, but I told her I can't stop cold turkey. But I did see a couple of turkeys fighting outside. Gets you in the mood. I mean, they were knocking the stuffing out of each other. But in the meantime, I'm just going to sit here and focus on telling you part 3 of The Hanged Woman. The exciting conclusion. You're not going to believe how it turns out. But for right now, let's talk about today's sponsor. Tell me, folks, have you ever said to yourself, gee, I wish I could take it with me when I die? Well, now you can. Fantome Movers.
Yes, Fantome Movers, the Afterlife's premier moving company. We don't care what you have or where you want it to go. Our kind and courteous staff will get it there. We're so efficient, it's scary. Fantome Movers, when you positively, absolutely have to take it with you, wherever you end up.
Yes, folks, Fantome Movers. They will move heaven and hell to bring you your most prized possessions, wherever you end up. Last time, in part 2 of The Hanged Woman, David Ebson, who was cursed by the dead woman hanging from the tree after he refused to cut her down, ran home, where he ran into his sister, Brenda, who was a tattletale, and decided to use David to ingratiate herself with her fanatically religious mother, who felt that God spoke to her and had chosen their family to bring about some religious crusade to bring about the end of the devil's reign. She found the note that David's principal left for Mom and Dad, that he never showed them, stating that he had been left behind another year. David didn't know how to tell his mom or dad any of these things because he was leading a double life. The one that he was really leading towards the future he wanted for himself versus the one his mother wanted, which was believing that he was going to become a priest and save the world on behalf of God, God's will. But there are times when the two worlds would just crash into one another, and this was one of those times. So David, he had a cut on his arm from a thorny plant that he ran into in the other world, and it was beginning to itch and burn and so on, and Brenda was putting band-aids on it and so on. When the mother comes in and starts beating on David for being such a heathen, for allowing the devil to seize control of his life, and she had to yank his soul back to God by any means necessary, and that means beating on him and forcing David to beg God for forgiveness. Meanwhile, later on that night, when the father, Pete, had come home, no one saw the scorpions that were lurking about the kitchen and finally stung Brenda, who was screaming in pain and The father was very concerned and wanted to take Brenda to the doctor. The mother wanted none of that because she felt this was a good test for God. That Brenda would have faith, and if she had faith in him, God would heal her. No need to go see a doctor. God would heal her right there on the spot if she had strong faith. But Pete, the father, he felt God gave us doctors for a reason, so he was going to take his daughter to the doctor and get her help. The mother wanted none of that because that would be slapping the face of God and showing that no one had any faith in him, and the devil would win. So Pete didn't care. He was just thinking of his daughter's well-being. David followed the father out when the father carried Brenda's body out into the yard where he was going to take the pickup truck and drive her to the hospital. Only to find out that all 4 tires of his pickup truck were mysteriously flat. He couldn't drive it anywhere. Storm clouds were rumbling overhead, and it was getting dark, and the father, he went across the street to go see if the neighbor could give them a ride to the hospital, when a car slammed into the father, knocked him several yards away, and the driver of the car crashed, and the car exploded, and the driver died, but the father was laying in the street. He was incoherent. He was just so badly injured and hurt that I don't think he actually knew where he was or what was going on. David, horrified, left his sister in the driveway, ran to go help the father. Didn't know what to do, yelled for his mother's help, and the mother came out, was horrified at seeing her husband injured in the road when she looked up at the sky and saw that not only were there storm clouds, but fire was churning in the sky. A huge maelstrom vortex that looked like it was going to consume the world itself. And the mother realized that the 3 days of darkness had finally arrived. David, wanting help, asked the mother to help get the father into the house. After a struggle, the 2 of them were able to finally get the dad into the house, and David went back out to get his sister and bring her inside. David wanted the mother to call 911, but she wouldn't do it because that would show that she had no faith in God. This was a wonderful opportunity. The 3 days of darkness was coming, and they were all going to be tested by fire, and the demons would run rampant through the world and destroy God's enemies. And in the end, this family would come and rally the survivors back to God. But David wanted help for his dad and sister, so he grabbed the mother's cell phone, called 911. And the woman at the other end says, 911, what's your emergency? Okay, just stay calm and tell me what happened. My dad was hit by a car. He's coughing up blood. My sister got stung by scorpions in our kitchen. I think she's having trouble breathing or something. And you need help? The voice asked. Yes, I need help. I live at 3237 Gorham Road. Please, send help. Hurry. There was a brief pause on the phone. Then, I needed help too, David. That old familiar feeling of dread returned to the pit of his stomach. He knew that voice, the voice of the hanged woman. I begged you for help and you abandoned me. He dropped the phone and it burst into flame right there on the floor. Clarina's laughter echoed through the burning device. That was the moment the power in the house went out and stayed out. And now part 3. June took some candles from a drawer beneath a bookshelf. Go grab the matches from the kitchen. David's mind was reeling as he hurried into the kitchen and felt around in the dark until he found the drawer he was looking for. He took the box of matches and was about to return to the living room when he heard a noise. It was a soft noise, like the gentle rustling of leaves, but he knew that whatever was causing it did not belong in his house. He took a match and struck it along the side of the box. When the match flared to life, its light illuminated the room. The floor encountered by the sink and back door was crawling with spiders and scorpions, just like the ones he saw in the other world by the pond. It looked like thousands of them were crawling all over the cabinets, ceiling, and floor, and a few seemed to see him and were scurrying in his direction. In a panic, David tossed the lit match at the tiny creatures and quickly left the room. He closed the door to the kitchen, took off his shirt, and placed the garment on the floor to cover the gap at the bottom of the door. It was not big enough to do the job, so he yanked the tablecloth off the dining room table, sending the centerpiece crashing to the floor. He stuffed the tablecloth against the bottom of the door until he was satisfied that nothing could get through. Another noise, this one much louder, caught his attention. The sound of something large and heavy hitting the roof outside. He was startled as the sound began to walk around. Thump, thump, thump. Footsteps traveled from one end of the roof to the other, followed by the sound of heavy flapping. It sounded like someone was shaking out a raincoat in slow, steady beats. And then, all of the sounds were gone. "Hurry, David," his mom yelled. "We have to light the blessed candle." David saw his mother's shadowy form in the darkness and joined her. He lit a match as she held out a white pillar candle for him. Once lit, June placed the candle on a table near a picture of Jesus. As June went around and lit more candles, David's arm started to hurt again. He looked at the cut in the candlelight and was sickened by what he saw. A thick, yellowish, pus-like substance was oozing out from under the adhesive bandages. What was worse was it looked like something was moving under the skin. David cautiously removed the bandages and hesitated before looking deeper into the wound. The cut itself looked horribly infected, and the pus was slowly oozing out. The movement beneath the skin persisted, and David did not really want to know what was in his arm. But he knew he had to look. Biting his lower lip against the pain, he pried the cut open with his fingers. Several wet black flies crawled out. He watched in stunned horror as the flies shook the wetness from their wings and flew away. He looked at the cut again and saw something moving even deeper in his arm. After prying the wound open again, he discovered that his arm was infested with hundreds of tiny, squirming maggots. David became lightheaded and felt as if he was going to throw up. Horrific and terrifying sounds could be heard from outside. The sounds of explosions and human screams alarmed him, and he looked to his mother, who was on her knees in prayer. With eyes closed, she had one hand touching Pete, while the other hand touched Brenda, both of whom looked as if they were about to die. Heavy footsteps approached the front door. Whatever it was growled and scratched at the wood beneath and breathed and sniffed like a wild dog. June opened her eyes and looked at David. "Don't worry, son. We're safe in here. The hordes of hell cannot enter the sanctified home of God's chosen family." With a loud cracking bang, the front door broke and fell in. An enormous 8-foot-tall, hairy, beast-like creature with 3 eyes, ram's horns, and very large, tattered bat-like wings stepped inside. David had never seen anything like it. It had all the appearance of a demon straight from hell. David was frozen with fear, but June grabbed a crucifix from a wall and held it defiantly at the beast. "I command you, unclean spirit, whoever you are, along with all of your minions now attacking us, we, the servants of God, return to the everlasting flames of hell." The demon snarled. "Obey me, for the Lord is on my side. You have no power here." The drooling demon stared at June for a moment, and then it began to laugh. A full, hearty, unpleasant laugh. "You amuse me, human," the beast said through rows of very sharp teeth. Its voice dripped with malevolence. "I'm going to have fun with you." June stepped closer to the foul-smelling creature and held the crucifix even higher. "By the power of Christ, I compel you! Leave this place and never return!" The demon reached out and took hold of the crucifix, which burst into flame while June was still holding on to it. She shrieked as she yanked her burned hand away. "I do not fear your God," the beast threw the ruined crucifix across the room. "And you are a fool to believe that pathetic excuse for a deity will protect you." We are God's chosen one. You cannot harm us. As the demon sauntered closer, two demon beasts resembling dogs entered the front with a determined gait. They both expectantly stood beside the demon. You think so, do you? I believe in God Almighty, creator and master of all things. June's face had an expression of absolute determination. He will not fail me. The demon was amused. Then call to him. Beseech your God to rescue you from my hands. See what happens. David watched in helpless terror as one demon dog sniffed around Brenda, the other around his dad. June stepped into the center of the room, looked toward heaven, and raised her arms in supplication. Dear Heavenly Father, your love and faithfulness, along with your goodness and mercy, surround me daily, so I will not fear whatever might come against me. My trust is in you, dear Lord, and I give thanks to you for your love and protection. In Jesus' name, amen. Grant, O Lord, thy protection, and in thy protection, strength. David, June, and the beast stood in silent anticipation. The demon mockingly looked around. Well, I'm waiting. June tried again. Lord, I have been your faithful servant. I have done everything you have commanded me to do. I have never faltered or strayed from the path you have laid before me. Never. You said you would protect me and those of my family who are faithful. So I ask you to protect me now from this foul creature of darkness. I await your divine tender mercy and protection. The demon smiled a hideously wicked smile. Your God has abandoned you, foolish mortal. He seized June by the neck, and his hairy fingers encircled her throat. Startled, June uselessly tried to pull his massive claw with its sharp nails from her neck. Now you will drink from the cup of demons and know true suffering. David snapped out of his frightened stupor and rushed to his mother's aid. He clutched a table lamp and charged at the hideous hell beast, who easily deflected the attack. With a powerful blow, the demon backhanded the boy and sent him crashing into the furniture across the room. June wanted to say something, but she could hardly breathe. David's lip was bleeding, and he crawled over the toppled furniture. He saw the demon lift his mother off the floor by the neck. Her legs thrashed as she grasped at the hand clutching her neck, and she gasped for air. You think you're so special. The demon looked her in the eye and bared his fangs. You think God has chosen you and your family to rid the world of evil, that you are some sort of Messiah. June's eyes widened as the demon tightened his grip. What you do not realize is that God has never spoken to you. You're insane. It's all in your head. It always was. There's no hope for you or your family. No protection. No God to save you. The demon dogs growled, opened wide their mouths, bit down on Brenda and Pete. Brenda screamed in terror as she was dragged out of the front door. Dad was unconscious, and he was dragged out behind her. David could hear his sister's agonized screams as they disappeared into the darkness. David screamed, "No!" But it was useless. His dad and sister were gone. The demon smiled at June. And now your soul belongs to me. The demon pulled June close enough to put his mouth over hers and sucked. Her eyes widened so much that they looked as if they would spring from her head. Her face became emaciated and her body began to shrivel. David's sanity was at the breaking point. "No!" he yelled. "No!" He ran into the kitchen, braved the spiders and scorpions, grabbed the butcher's knife from the counter, and hurried to the back door. Many crawling things crunched beneath his sneakers as he opened the door and ran outside. He could feel what felt like spiders crawling on his skin, and he had to think quickly. He truly hoped nothing nasty was lurking in the backyard lawn as he held the knife at a safe distance and quickly dropped and rolled onto the grass to crush whatever was on him. David jumped to his feet and ran. He did not feel anything crawling on him, so rolling in the lawn must have done the trick. He held the knife tightly as he ran along the long, winding road to the pond. The neighborhood was in flames, and the sounds of tormented screams filled the air. Fireballs fell from the turbulent sky and impacted all over town, creating tremendous explosions. One fireball struck David's house, causing it to erupt into a powerful outburst of flame and debris. The concussion knocked him down. As he lay, recovering from having the wind knocked out of him, he could see the dark shapes of scary things flying in the sky overhead, and he knew that he did not have much time. He clutched the knife, got back onto his feet, and ran a steady run to the pond. The flaming sky lit his way. He ran and ran, avoiding black snakes and overhearing the heavy flapping of large wings that sounded too close for comfort. He was almost to the pond. It was just over the next rise. The road appeared clear, and he felt like he was going to make it, as long as there was nothing nasty waiting for him on the other side of that hill. He stopped to catch his breath for a moment. His arm was burning with pain, but he could not worry about that. He had to stay focused. He had to finish what he started. He was about to run again when a flapping came from overhead, and two massive claws reached down, grabbed him by the shoulders, sank their sharp talons deep into his flesh. David let out a tormented scream as a demon lifted him into the air and carried him away. David still had the knife, so he reached up and stabbed and slashed at those claws. The demon shrieked in pain and released the boy, who fell hard into some very twiggy plants. Not allowing himself time to recover, David struggled to his feet, retrieved the knife from where it fell, and looked around for attacking beasts. For the moment, the coast looked clear, so he took the opportunity to examine his shoulders. Blood was pouring out of several holes in each shoulder, and he was feeling lightheaded. He was going into shock, but he had to fight it. He recognized his surroundings and saw that he was quite close to the pond and the overgrown area at the far end. He gathered what strength he had left and staggered to the cluster of overgrowth. The creepy natural pathway had returned. After taking several deep breaths to keep from passing out, he stepped forward and began his return to the other world. Several minutes later, after traversing through fog, thorns, and deadly bugs, David emerged within the dead world. He forced his tormented body across the land, past the scurrying beetles to the craggy hill. Storm clouds rumbled overhead and were a welcome change from the world he had just left behind. His eyesight was becoming hazy, and he dragged himself around the hill toward the thin, dangling object hanging from the tree. "Well, well, look who it is," Clarina said in a taunting, sarcastic voice. "The boy who ran away." David staggered to her tree. Clarina's rotted face stared at him with her eyeless skull. Her matted hair rustled in the wind. "Goodness, you look like how I feel. Having a bad day, David?" The boy said nothing as he carefully held the knife and began to climb her tree. Clarina tilted her head. "What are you doing?" David found it hard to speak. I'm cutting you down." "I thought you were under the impression that I was evil and deserved to stay here." David reached the limb with the tied rope. He carefully took hold of the rope and readied the knife. He took some deep breaths and said, "I just don't care anymore." He sliced away at the nasty old rope, which began to unravel with each cut. Clarina clenched her fists in anticipation. David continued to cut, His vision was becoming darker, and his hands looked so far away. Finally, the knife cut through, and Clarina dropped in a clattering heap upon the ground. David dropped the knife as he lost consciousness. His limp body fell from the tree, struck a few branches on the way down, and hit the ground near Clarina. His life drifted away, and neither he nor Clarina moved again. High in the sky, the storm clouds began to part, and the sun shined down on the dead world. Little by little, the land sprang to life, and the sun's rays began to warm Clarina's cold bones. Sparkles of light magically appeared around Clarina, and her bones began to glow. The radiant figure of a woman rose from the ground and stretched her arms to the sky. When the glowing faded, a beautiful enchantress stood where only a pile of bones lay moments before. She had long brown hair and wore a gown of gold that shimmered in the sunlight. She stretched her muscles for the first time in untold years, and it felt so good. She saw David's pale body laying nearby. She lovingly knelt down and placed her glowing hands on either side of his face. David's eyes opened wide, and he took a long breath of air. When his breathing normalized, he sat up, and Clarina smiled. "Hello, David." Her voice was soft and pleasant. "Welcome back." The boy looked around, not entirely sure what had happened. He frantically looked himself over and found that the puncture wounds on his shoulders were gone. Even the cut on his arm had disappeared. "What's going on?" he asked, more than a little confused. "I don't get it. What happened?" "All of your injuries have been eradicated," she assured him. "All is as it was." David stood and moved around, testing his body. It felt great. He looked around at the transformed world in awe and wonder. The sun was shining, the sky was blue, and the dead world was now green, lush, and beautiful. The most wild assortment of exotic flowers he had ever seen bloomed and gave off the most soothing of scents. David looked at Clarina, not finding any words to say. Clarina sensed his discomfort, so she spoke. "Thank you. Thank you for cutting me down from that tree." David cleared his throat. "You're welcome." The woman's expression became more serious, and she gently placed a warm hand on his shoulder. "I'm very sorry, David. That was a terrible thing I did to you, and I'm ashamed at myself for having done it. But I was desperate. You were the first person to come by in nearly 100 years, and I was just so very desperate." She gave him a hug. "But through it all, you came back. You truly have a remarkably good heart." David burst into tears and hugged her back. So many years of anger, frustration, and fear just poured out of him through his tears, not to mention the anguish from today's experiences. It was just all being released. She stroked his hair and consoled him. "That's all right, David. Let it out. Let it all out." He was not sure how long he had been hugging her and crying, but when he finally stopped, he stepped away from her and wiped his eyes with his hands. "I'm sorry," he said, feeling rather foolish for crying. "I didn't mean to do that." Clarina removed a very soft piece of cloth from her clothing and wiped his face. "Don't apologize. Crying is good for the soul. It helps us get rid of all the negative energy, stress, and pain we keep bottled up deep inside." The woman knelt in front of David and took his hands in hers. "You gave me a wonderful gift, and I cannot undo the terrible things I did to you, regrettably. But I can give you a gift in return. Your world has been restored, and when you return home, I have a feeling that things are going to be different between you and your family." David thought about what she said, but was not entirely sure what she meant. "I don't understand." She smiled a warm, loving smile. "You'll see." Hummingbirds darted and flitted around the two of them, and Clarina gently squeezed his hands. Your whole future is ahead of you, David. Live the best life you possibly can. Stay kind, stay strong, and stay true to yourself. David was still incredibly unsure about what was happening, but he knew one thing for certain. He felt at peace with this woman, and he appreciated her kind words. "I'll do my best," was all he could think of saying. She smiled. "I can't ask for more than that." The woman stood, and David noticed that a number of hummingbirds had actually increased. Many were sitting in the branches in the trees and plants nearby. The enchantress stretched out her arms and raised her hands. "It's time to send you home." David felt sad. "What about you? Where are you going to go?" She thought for a moment. "I suppose I'll continue my search for my sister. She may still be out there somewhere." "What if that wizard is still around? I don't want you to get caught again." She was touched by his concern. "I imagine I'll have to deal with that when I get to it. Not to worry though, I'll be more careful." David gave her one last hug. "I'm going to miss you. Sorry I took so long cutting you down." She stroked his hair and he closed his eyes. "Everything is going to be all right, David. And who knows, perhaps we'll meet again one day." David enjoyed being in Clarina's warm and comforting embrace, until suddenly she wasn't there anymore. He opened his eyes and discovered that he was standing in his own living room. The sun was shining outside and everything appeared as it usually did. He found himself wearing a shirt and he took stock of the situation. He was in his own living room, that much was certain, yet all of the religious imagery his mother was so fond of was conspicuously absent. Sounds from the kitchen drew his attention and he cautiously crept to the doorway. The sweet aromas of cooking greeted his nose. Mom and Brenda were busy preparing supper. The clock on the wall read 4:35, which meant that Dad was not home yet. The kitchen was somehow different as well, but David could not quite put his finger on what it was. Then there was his mom. She was dressed differently than he was used to. Her hair was done in a more attractive style, and her clothes were not so conservative and depressing. There was also no trace of a rosary on her anywhere. David's mind was having difficulty processing it all, especially the conversation she and Brenda were having, which seemed oddly surreal. Brenda talked to Mom about boys, but Mom never participated in conversations about boys except to declare that they were a pathway to hell. Yet David actually overheard June ask Brenda what the girl was going to wear on her date with Tony on Friday night. That exchange was definitely not normal. June saw David in the doorway. "Hey, sleepyhead, enjoy your nap?" David wasn't quite sure what to say. "Yeah, I guess." David was surprised to see a plate of freshly baked chocolate chip cookies on the table. Cookies and other sweets were forbidden in the house. They were the tools of the devil and violated one of the 7 deadly sins or something like that. Only fruit and berries were gifts from God. "Are those cookies?" he asked. June put a tuna casserole in the oven and looked at him sternly. "Hands off those, mister. I don't want you to spoil your appetite for supper." Brenda washed some lettuce for a salad. Not a scorpion in sight. "Hey, David, excited about seeing that movie tonight?" David was confused, but tried not to show it. "The movie?" Brenda gave him a puzzled look. "Yes, the movie. You and I are going to see the movies tonight, remember?" He tried to act casual. "Oh, right, the movie. What are we seeing again? The Clown Bears?" The girl stopped working and glared at her brother. "Oh, ha ha. No, you dork. The Coagulator." "Ooh," June said with a smile. "I hear that movie is really scary." "You're okay with that movie, Mom?" he asked with a great deal of concern and caution. "Sure, why not?" June said as she removed a can of green beans from the cupboard. "I'm not the one who has to watch all that blood and gore." David walked over to his sister. You and I are going to see that movie tonight. Of course, we've been planning it for a week. I thought you'd take Jenny or something. Jenny's old news, you know that. Brenda looked at him with concern. Are you okay? You're acting weird, even for you. June poured the green beans into a bowl and glanced at him, obviously waiting to hear his response. David smiled. Yeah, I'm good. June walked over to him and gave him a big hug. It did not seem cold and unfeeling. It was actually warm and loving. He was not accustomed to that from his mother giving him such hugs, but he welcomed it. Tears welled up in his eyes, and he did not want either of them to know it. I love you, Mom. I love you too, sweetheart. June kissed him on the head and released him. Now go get washed up for supper. Dinner will be ready soon. Sure thing, he said, and he walked out of the kitchen. He stopped and glanced back at his mom and sister, who were acting like two normal people. It was strange, creepy, and yet wonderful to see. Clarina was behind it. She had to be. Not only did she reset the world, but somehow she reset his life as well. This had to be the gift she referred to. Giddy with excitement, it filled his soul with warmth to finally begin to relax for the first time in his life. He spotted a hummingbird perched outside of the living room window. It appeared to watch him, and he smiled and waved at it. Thank you, he said to the bird, and the tiny bird flitted away. David was now alone in his new life and left to wonder about the days to come. He did not know where he was going or what would happen next, but for the first time in his life, he felt optimistic about the future. With a grin on his face, he went upstairs to wash. He was ready to begin his new life. He is ready for happiness. Thank you, folks, for joining me. That was The Hanged Woman, written by William J. M. McQueen. I know it was a long story, and I appreciate you spending time to view each part. I could have made it shorter, but I wanted to stay true to the story. It was important to get the details right. There will be long stories in the future. Just letting you know. There will be short ones. There will be long ones. I don't know how long they'll be, but I will let you know. In the meantime, please comment below. I would love to hear what you have to say. Like this video, and please subscribe to this channel and hit the little notification bell. I don't want you to miss anything because more will be coming your way. The holidays are coming. Holiday stories are coming. So in the meantime, folks, I just want to thank you for taking the time to join me, Madman McQueen, here at the Mystical Dream Studio. Remember, do as you imagine, and the stars shall light the way for your dreams. Until next time, farewell and sweet dreams.